Okay, really good, Tade. 600 metres to the bike change. 300. Get out of the way! This is for the Tour de France. Yellow jersey, polka dot jersey, white jersey. Come on, mate, it's all for you.
Best time.
Yeah!
Hello and welcome to the final La Course on Tête podcast. And would you believe it? We've made it to Paris. They said it couldn't be done, but hey, this is the tour. Welcome, as always, to Aérogramme listeners and to Peloton magazine subscribers. I'm OJ Borg, alongside William Fotheringham, and we're going to take a look at what unfolded on a crazy Stage 20, the time trial at Planche de Belfi, as well as the youngest rider in the last... Is it the last 117 years to win the Tour de France?
Technically, he's the youngest rider ever to arrive in Paris as the winner. The winner in 1904, Henri Cornet, was announced the winner sort of post hoc facto because the first four riders were disqualified. So Cornet is the youngest ever winner, but Pogačar is the youngest guy ever to come into Paris as the winner.
Are we going with that? I've heard so many pronunciations of his surname. Are we going with Pogačar?
That's what I go with.
Is that because I've tried Pogačar, which I seem to make a mess of every time. He's been known lovingly by most people as the Pog, which I think is lovely. Tête, Pogačar, however you want to say it. He won the Tour de France, the 2020 Tour de France, the tour that they thought could not be done. Before we get on to him and that crazy TT on Stage 20, Stage 21 was the usual roll into Paris, William, which was weird. There was no crowds, really. It was bizarre.
It was very, very strange. I mean, it was really weird watching it and seeing the Champs-Élysées almost completely empty. I mean, there are currently gatherings in France for the likes of sports events and things are limited at a maximum outdoors to 5,000. So that's why there were so few people on the Champs-Élysées. I mean, it was because of that limit. And it was truly surreal. It was very strange because you saw them going through the Louvre past that beautiful triangle in the middle of the Louvre, the pyramid, but it was all completely empty. I mean, and it was weird as well because the streets were actually quite full around the Champs. It was just obviously when they got there, they had to have it pretty empty. So that was very strange. But then, it's been a strange tour.
It has been a strange tour. Final stage into Paris was won by Sam Bennett of Discern It Quick Step, who rode in and won the stage. He's looked like the best sprinter at this year's tour.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I had a sort of I had an amusing social media discussion, not a spat. I mean, it was very amicable with an Irish colleague about whether Sam was the best after he won his stage way back in the first week, I think it was now. When he won his first stage, and I pointed out gently that Caleb Ewan had won too. Whereas actually, to be fair, today it was a straight up battle. Ewan wasn't there, so. You'd have to say, I still think Ewan is absolutely excellent. I don't think there's a huge amount between him and Bennett, but you've got to look at those two stage wins, also winning on one of which is the Champs-Élysées, obviously the Sprinters World Championship as they call it, and also with Bennett, the way that he's contested that green jersey with Peter Sagan over the last 10 days. He's not missed a beat. He's done so well, and he's always beaten Sagan in the straight-up sprints. He's pretty much beaten everyone all the time, and he's ridden absolutely magnificently. And yeah, it's one of those lovely things because I was there in 2013 when he won what I think was the breakthrough stage of his, the breakthrough race of his career when he won the stage of the Tour of Britain into Caerphilly. And yeah, it was a lovely thing to think that you've seen that, and 7 years on, there he is, and it's been a while coming for him. He's worked and worked and worked. He's ridden the Tour 2 times before, hasn't really worked out for him each time, but this time he's absolutely nailed it. Hasn't missed a beat.
It was, and I'm a big fan of the side-on shot that the French TV cameras picked up of him sprinting at the end and just seeing the amount of pace he had in that jump, which is what has won him. So that's what happened as we got into Paris. We know about the green jersey. We know who won on the line there. But that TT, Stage 20, La Planche de Belfi, we knew something might happen. Did you see Tadej Pogačar? Did you see him overturning that lead on Roglic?
No, in common with absolutely everybody else, I think, even indeed Pogačar himself, I don't think anyone saw that coming. I certainly assumed, given that Roglic is a decent time trialist and a good climber, I knew that Pogačar had been climbing better. if you'd sort of pressed me, I might have said, look, I think Pogačar should climb quicker than him normally. And in theory, Roglic will go faster than him on the flat. Therefore, I might have, if pushed, I would have said that Pogačar would take about 15, 20 seconds max on the climb only. As it was, obviously, Pogačar completely wiped the floor. When you watch those television images of them yesterday, and you saw how the two of them were riding, Roglic's body language was absolutely horrific. I mean, he looked desperately bad from the minute he came down the ramp. He seemed to me to have this horrible sort of stiffness in his lower back and buttock area, and it was just like he wasn't getting the power out. And who knows why that was? They'll probably go away and analyze it. But it was quite telling to see the sort of the double images of him and Pogačar, and Pogačar just looked so fluid, so powerful. He was getting the power down every time the road went uphill. He was aggressively attacking every corner. He just looked so on it. And to be honest, in my heart, when I saw the amount of time that Pogačar had taken out of him in the first 14 kilometers, where it was roughly a second a kilometer, I thought, this really doesn't look good for Roglic. I didn't think at that point that Pogačar was going to win, but I thought this looks really bad, because you can't look that horrible in a time trial and lose that time and then be coming up to a major climb without it being very, very worrying.
I think this is interesting that Michael Woods tweeted out. He said yesterday pundits were saying how Roglic fell apart, finishing 30 seconds off a former world TT champion in our TT. When you've been defending yellow isn't falling apart. This wasn't Roglic falling apart. This was Pog having one of the greatest rides in recent history.
I think that's true. I think Pogačar did an absolutely outstanding ride. I think for him to put that amount of time into riders like Dumoulin and Van Aert is terrific. But I think you can't escape the fact that when Roglic got to the climb, he blew up catastrophically. I mean, his time losses to Pogačar on the climb, for a rider in the yellow jersey who's reputedly a good time trialist, who's won, let's not forget, he's won time trial stages in major tours before, because his first major win was a time trial stage in the Giro. Okay, it's the final week. Yes, he did a good ride, but he did fall apart. And you can relatively speaking, fifth on the stage, for a normal cyclist, that wouldn't be disgraceful. But for the Maillot Jaune of the Tour de France, and what's more, to lose the best part of 2 minutes, that is a kicking.
Some people don't like a TT. I love a TT for exactly this reason, because Roglic had the best team around him. You know, we've said this all the way with the podcast we've done and the stuff you've written on the website, and for Peloton has said that we've talked about how rock and roll, how brilliant this team of stars that Jumbo-Visma got. And when it comes to one-on-one, where Roglic has no one around him, it goes to show that individual brilliance can trump a team at the Tour de France.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the race of truth. It's been called that for donkey's years. And obviously, it doesn't lie. I mean, the verdict is always far more severe when you include a whacking great hill in it at the end, and you have it as the final important stage of the Tour de France. I think in a flat time trial, Roglic might just about have hung on. You know, he might just have clung onto it. But time trials, when they are like that one there yesterday's, they are brilliant. They are compelling. They can, unfortunately, be like watching paint dry. I've always,
but then so can some stages.
Yeah,
Jeremy called it a very posh sportif on some days.
Yeah, well, I think that's a little bit unfair. I think there was one stage where they didn't go terribly quickly, and I think that was made up for by by stages like the Lavor Stage, where they absolutely raced their socks off from kilometre naught. That stage, I think of all the stages in the Tour, the one apart from I think the time trial will live with me a long, long time, because it was quite something to sit in front of the telly and watch one guy falling apart and another guy absolutely triumphing, and the whole hierarchy of the race just changing in the space of 20, 30 minutes. To see that in front of you, it's very, very memorable. It's not, I wouldn't say it's pleasant viewing, because you feel for the guy who's losing, but it is quite something to see. But apart from that, the other stage, which will live with me, I think probably until my memory goes, which some say might not be that long, The other one that will live with me is that Lavor stage, which was outstanding. Now, that was a stage where you simply could not stop watching I started watching that at kilometre naught, and I don't know if I went away and stopped or I may have recorded it, but I watched literally every kilometre of that stage because it was so compelling. You knew once Sagan's team, Bora Hansgrohe, had gone to the front and put Sammy Bennett under pressure, there was an immediate question: will Bennett come back? Will Caleb Ewan come back? Then it was like, right, the front peloton there, that they've been under pressure all day. What's going to happen? When's it going to kick off? And then it's like, well, look at the map. It's going to be Castra. Coming out of Castra, whack! It all kicks off. And I mean, that stage was very, very special. To see them go from the gun on a flat stage and have a team like Bora riding full gas for 3/4 of the stage, and then Ineos and Jumbo take over for the final. That was an amazing stage.
It was. It's been an amazing Tour de France. And in fact, we're going to reflect on it in just a second with Jeremy and Peter Cossins, who are actually been in France for this Tour de France. First, though, I just want to give you a couple more stats. We talked before. What did we say? That he's the youngest ever winner of a Tour de France? No. He is...
the youngest ever rider to enter Paris as the winner.
Yeah,
he's also the guy to win the Tour because Henri Cornet was younger in 1904, but then Cornet was given it. 1904. Oh, God, excuse me. So Cornet was given it afterwards because they disqualified the first 4 riders. So Pogačar is not technically, but you can say he's the youngest guy to ride into Paris as the winner.
He's also the first ever to win the Tour de France on a Colnago bike, apparently, and the first rider of the Tour to win 3 jerseys since Merckx took yellow, green, and the white combination jersey in '69.
The polka dot in '69.
Was it polka dot?
Yeah, he's the first guy to win white, polka dot, and yellow, because the polka dot, the white was only invented in 1975. And it's probably the most impressive Tour debut since Merckx in 1969.
Are we in danger of overhyping him like we did with Burnell last year?
No, I think what we shouldn't say is that he will do what Merckx did and win the next 3 Tours. I don't think we should say that. I think he will win the Tour in future. I think the example of Burnell is very, very telling. We all, a year ago, everyone was saying, Burnell will win the Tour for the next 5 years. It's going to be so dull. And of course, what we've ended up with is the most exciting Tour since 1989, maybe. I mean, it's in that league. So I wouldn't now say Pogačar will win the Tour next year. He's only 20. Well, tomorrow he's 22.
What a birthday present!
What
a birthday present!
Hilarious. But he will win the Tour again. I would not put money on him to win it next year, simply because he's so young. Stuff will happen. It's going to be a massive thing to deal with. How he'll react to that at his age, no matter how prematurely mature he is, if that's the correct way to put it, if he's, no matter how responsible and mature he is, that's going to be a big thing to carry next year. And the competition next year will be intense.
It will be intense. Something I did want to play, actually. This is something lovely that I found on Twitter. And it's behind the scenes from stage 20. Now, this is in the team car, the UAE Team Emirates team car, as he was attacking that final TT.
Okay, really good, Tadej. 600 metres to the bike change. 300. Get out of the way! This is for the Tour de France. Yellow jersey, polka dot jersey, white jersey. Come on, mate, it's all for you.
Best time.
Yeah!
You can hear there, William, how excited they were in the team car. Is that usual excitement? Is that how excited they would be? I mean, their man's just about to take yellow. What a moment!
What a moment! I mean, wouldn't you? I mean, yeah. Yes, of course, it's got to be that exciting. They have been sitting there for 3 weeks, wondering how their guy was going to win the Tour. They've been watching him claw back bits of time here and there, because obviously he lost time, he lost 1.25 minutes in that stage of level, that windy stage I was just talking about. They've watched him claw back that time. They've looked at Roglic with a 57-second advantage. I thought, unlikely unless we get a really good time trial. And suddenly it's happening there in front of them. And really, there's not a lot they can do other than just say, come on, mate, you're doing great, you're going to win. What can they do other than celebrate wildly?
The only thing that gets me, the only thing from the entire thing, is there's not more swearing. I thought you'd be absolutely losing it.
I can say, having watched riders I've worked with win races in the past, put it this way, you wouldn't want to record what comes out of my mouth when they win. I mean, it's not good, I have to say. I mean, I'm ashamed of it, but there are many F-bombs going around when my riders win races, and that's obviously in a very, very small league. Now I'm amazed there's no F-bombs. I'm amazed that they're so cultured about it, but it's fantastic.
It is. So we know that Tadej, I'm going to get his name right at some point, that we know that Pogačar has won the Tour de France, the 2020 Tour de France. Roglic came in second, a minute down or 59 seconds down. Third place on the podium, which is up there with everything he's ever won. A word about Richie Porte. For him to get third at this year's Tour de France, considering where he is in his career and the injuries he's had, is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's very lovely, because Richie is a nice guy. He's been around for donkey's years, and he's had so much lousy luck. I wrote in a preview for my preview about Trek Segafredo what was going to happen. Well, I wrote Richie Porte is good, but stuff happens to him, and that is pretty much Richie Porte. So yeah, I don't think there's anyone who isn't heartened and happy to see Richie hit that third place on the podium, possibly apart from Mikel Landa, because obviously on Thursday, Landa potentially knocked Porte off that podium spot. Landa rode very well on Wednesday and Thursday, and his Bahrain McLaren team did as well. And I think they would have knocked Porte off that third podium spot if Porte hadn't had a bit of lucky help from Wout van Aert and Tom Dumoulin, who wanted to get up to the front with Roglic, and after Porte punctured at the top of the Col de Glières, and they pulled him back up. He was lucky, but then, hey, you make your own luck. That's what the bike race is all about. I just think that Landa might go, well, hey, come on. But you make your own luck.
You do. You definitely do, especially in a 3-week Grand Tour. Now, let's reflect on this year's Tour and the enduring nature of something that Christian Prudhomme said only stops at wars. Jeremy Whittle chatted to fellow La Course en Tête alumni Peter Cossins in the palatial setting of an unnaturally quiet press room ahead of the final TT up to La Planche de Belleville.
So, Pete, we're here in Ronchamp outside the final press room before the Tour gets into Paris tomorrow on Sunday. Well, what's your impressions of this Tour? Have you enjoyed it? Do you think it's been an exciting Tour?
I think it's a tour that we'll never forget. There's no doubt about that, because obviously the images will stay with us forever of everybody wearing masks, the riders, the fans, of the effect that the virus has had on, the fact that it's in September, so everything's quite different. France looks different. It has been hot, actually. Normally it wouldn't be as hot as it has been, but it's made the race quite different. In terms of the actual racing, I have enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, we've had some slack days, we've had some good days. I suppose the thing that's disappointed me more than anything is the fact that it was built up as this kind of Jumbo v Ineos duel, and that really hasn't come to pass at all.
No, and I think that is one of the big disappointments. I mean, there have been some real highlights in terms of individual days, I'd agree, and there have been some days when you think this is just almost like watching a big sportif, a very high-end sportif. But at the same time, it hasn't quite had the tension in terms of, I think a lot of us have felt that we've kind of known pretty much since, I don't know when exactly you'd say, but middle of the race, really, since Roglic took the jersey, stage 9, I think it's stage 8, stage 9. I think we knew then how the film was going to end. Do you think?
Yeah, it was interesting. Kind of in the Pyrenees, you got the impression that obviously Pogačar bounced back from his time loss in the wind, and partly because he wasn't really a threat to the guys up higher up on GC at that point. But talking to the DSs on a lot of teams, including people on Jumbo, they were saying, well, we're expecting Ineos to come really strongly in the third week. That's what they've been building to. They've got a history of doing this kind of thing. And really, there wasn't really a sign that was ever going to happen. They looked like they were struggling a lot of the time. That Sivakov and Amador were struggling from the very opening day of the race when they crashed. Michał Kwiatkowski's obviously been strong. Castroviejo to a certain extent. But they never really seemed like a strong force, and Burnell has kind of highlighted that, really. He's kind of been hanging on, and you're kind of thinking maybe when we got onto the longer climbs in the Alps, he would emerge. But of course, we never even got that far before he disappeared, really.
Do you think they knew before the tour started that this was going to be a down year for them? Because I've started to look, in hindsight, looking back at obviously the Dauphiné and the Tour de l'Ain, those wall build-up races to the Tour, all pretty compressed. You know, you can see the writing on the wall looking back then, can't you?
Yeah, it was interesting. I went to the Route d'Occitanie, which was the first race that was in France after the lockdown ended, and Ineos just completely dominated it. But I mean, the opposition was good, but Jumbo weren't there, and they were obviously all on a high from that. But then they went to the Tour de l'Ain, and Jumbo wiped the floor with them. They went to the Dauphiné, and the same thing happened. And I know there's been questions about whether Geraint Thomas should have been in. I mean, based on what we saw at the Dauphiné, he didn't look like he was ready for the Tour, and they probably did make the right selection, but they've just been off the pace completely. Something's gone wrong somewhere. I don't know what it is, but it just seems like they've not been at the races all the way through.
Do you think, I mean, I'm fascinated by the idea that, you know, these highly trained pro athletes who download immense amounts of data, it gets poured over and analysed by, you know, fantastic sports scientists, the very elite in sports science. How much do you think lockdown kind of emotionally, psychologically, mentally had an impact on some of these riders? Because it feels to me like, you know, we massively underestimated the difficulties of dealing with that. I mean, they're all, as I said before on the podcast, they're all human beings. They've all got kids and families, you know, and grandparents and so on.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying about the Tour just being at a different time and seeing things in a different way. Of course, the whole structure of their season is different as a result of the virus. So I was talking to Rod Ellingworth yesterday and just talking about team selection. I mean, based around what's gone on at Ineos, but also about his own team selection for Bahrain. And they left Dylan Teuns out. He was actually we're at La Planche de Belfi today, and he was a winner here last year. And that was a bit of a surprise on their team. But Rod was saying, basically, he just got everything a little bit wrong. I mean, it looked like he was doing everything right during lockdown, but somehow his form just didn't come together. And I'm guessing we're seeing that over the whole peloton, really. We're seeing guys who you'd expect to perform who haven't performed, or people who you'd expect to have been selected, like Thomas, haven't been selected. I think it's made a massive difference. Yeah, I mean, I guess it'll be interesting towards the end of the season to talk to some of the coaches when they've got had a bit more time to reflect on that and see what's gone on, for them to give a bit of appraisal of what's happened.
I mean, on the bright side, we've seen, I guess, some new riders breaking through. Tadej Pogačar, obviously, and then Guillaume Martin. I'm thinking of other names as well.
Mark Hirschi.
Mark Hirschi. So then the consolidation of Caleb Ewan's position is probably maybe the quickest of the sprinters. I mean, he's really struggled in the mountains, but he and Sam Bennett are definitely, you know, the days of Cavendish, Sagan is gone, really, I think, and now we're looking at a new rivalries in sprinters. But among the younger riders, who's really caught your eye?
I mean, Hirschi, he probably stands out because, I mean, he's just been so aggressive on so many different occasions. I mean, obviously, he almost won the stage into Larons in the Pyrenees. He almost won the stage on day two into Nice, and Alaphilippe out-sprinted him. Then he finally did win a stage at Saran. We saw him on the attack again the other day when he was in the break with Kwiatkowski and Carapaz, dueling for the polka dot jersey and kind of overcooking a corner. And he's just been hugely impressive, I think. I mean, he's 23, I think, 22, 23. And you just wonder what he might do over the next few years. I mean, I think what Sunweb have been really good at, and Soren Kragh Andersen, who, after he won his second stage yesterday, mentioned this, was the fact that they're really good at bringing through young talent and developing them and kind of setting them up and almost like presenting them to the big teams as a finished package and saying, right, here you go, we've got this guy ready, now you can kind of... And it'd be nice to see Sunweb getting a bit more, not so much credit, but a bit more value out of some of these riders, I guess, seeing them win big races in their colours rather than them just going on somewhere else and doing it in somebody else's colours.
And they've been incredibly smart, haven't the way they've ridden the race, and they've targeted separate stages, and they've obviously not thought at any point of any dreams towards GC. And they've got a very smart young sports director, Matt Winston, who most people probably weren't particularly acquainted with, but it seems that he is the brains behind a lot of the success that they've had. Returning a bit to Egan Burnell, because I think a lot of people are quite puzzled about what happened with him. We know kind of, obviously we've seen the evidence of his form on the road, and we know that there have been some changes in his life, some personal changes, and where he lives and things like that. He's now based in Monaco. I'm not sure how permanent that is, but he's in Monaco at the moment. Is he a one-off tour winner, or do you think is he Jan Ullrich, who's somebody who everybody said, he's going to win for years, he's going to win 12 months ago everybody said this guy's going to win 5-6 tours. Now everybody's saying, will he win another tour?
It's hard to say. I mean, I have to say, after watching his win last year, and obviously we kind of, the way that his victory came together on that stage into Teen that was washed out, and he'd broken away on the Iseron. There's still that kind of, would he have made it? Wouldn't he have made it? Would the group have chased him down? Would he have got enough time? And he was the race's strongest rider in the end. But when we got a couple of months on from that, and Pogačar came through, and he won 3 stages at the Vuelta, and he finished 3rd overall. I was immediately thinking, well, this is going to be a duel that we're going to see going on for the next few years. I mean, obviously Remco's coming into that, and I don't think anybody's going to dominate for the next few years in the way that perhaps that Chris Froome has. I mean, people might win multiple tours, but I can see it being a bit more broken up, things being a bit more competitive, because the number of riders the number of top riders being spread among different teams is increasing. The teams are all individually getting stronger as well. So, I mean, you've got Jumbo this year, Ineos are going to come back. You can imagine that with Remco in their team, that De Koning could probably emerge as a stronger GC force as well. So, I've got no clue, but I think Burnell will come back, and I think he'll win Grand Tours. Whether he wins a tour again, I don't know, but I'm sure he'll be up there challenging for it again. I just think this is a one-off, really. Yeah,
agreed. We'll see, won't we? I mean, obviously he's got to reassess and kind of reset, and the whole team will, because Adam Yates is coming in too, Froome is moving on, so there's a lot of change going to happen there. So they're in a period of kind of transformation and restructure, which brings me to the last thing I wanted to ask you, which is about the tour itself, because this has been an extraordinary Tour de France, obviously because of the pandemic, but also there's been some other kind of whisperings, I feel, personally, having done the tour for so many years, that it's less loved than it used to be. I mean, we've had these kind of few mayors rumbling about the tour being a macho event, a polluting event. One particular instance was the mayor of Lyon, who kind of 2 days before the tour arrived basically slagged it off. And then yesterday, I think it was at the Start Village, Christian Prudhomme made a big impassioned plea for everybody to get behind the tour because it was part of the patrimony and the culture of France. But is it an anachronism now? I mean, is it kind of almost insensitive of the tour to have carried on this year, despite all the suffering that people have experienced in France and around the rest of the world because of the pandemic?
I don't think so. No, I mean, I think for most French people, I mean, they haven't turned out in the numbers that they would do normally to watch it, which is understandable, or in most places they haven't anyway. But I think it's just such an emblematic event for the French people. It kind of marks. It's one of those things in the year that, like La Rentrée, and at the start of September when all the kids go back to school. It's one of those kind of dates that are set in stone that everybody kind of sets their annual calendar to. I mean, it's changed a bit this year, but I think it's important that it's gone ahead. It shows that life is not obviously not back to normal, but we can all carry on. But I think the key thing about the tour is it needs to change, and it needs to change much more quickly than it is doing. I mean, it needs to have a women's race. There's absolutely no doubt about that. They're saying it's going to happen in 2022. It needs to, and cycling, I mean, we talked a lot about this, cycling needs to kind of better reflect just the kind of the racial mix that there is in France and the rest of Europe, which of course it doesn't at all. And there are issues. I mean, the mayors are upset about the environmental footprint it has on France, and that needs to change as well. I mean, we're looking around, and there's a big truck next to us here that's just full of full of printers that are churning out reams and reams of papers every day.
It's full of result sheets that nobody reads and then bins in the press room.
I know, yeah, and it's just, I just think sometimes there's no joined up thinking. I mean, do we need all these vehicles? Does it need to be as big? I mean, when you see the tour, and people say this to me regularly, you see all these vehicles following behind it, and of course there are hundreds of other vehicles, the press and trucks and God knows what, that you don't see. Do we need all these vehicles all tramping around France and going to all these wonderful places? I mean, but on the whole, I think Prudhomme's impassioned speech, de Gaulle-like speech, I guess, was interesting. But at the same time, people have voted in these mayors for a reason. They want change in France, and just to say, well, this is part of France's heritage and we must all rally behind it, isn't good enough, really. He needs to kind of reflect more what people are thinking in France as a whole.
No, I completely agree with that. I think they've got a lot of work they've got to do, because they mustn't be left behind, and they've been left behind on things like, as you say, women's cycling. We've only just got rid of podium girls, and that was seen as a great breakthrough. I mean, how did it take so long? And now, there's another battle to be fought in terms of Black Lives Matter and the racial mix, as you say. But be interesting to see what happens in the next few months, because, of course, because this tour is ending in late September, we will know the route for next year pretty soon, and we'll be back here in a few months' time anyway. So that's something we can look forward to. Anyway, thanks for your time. There's a press buffet over there with your name on it. So
cheers, Jeremy.
Cheers.
Peter Cossins there talking to Jeremy Whittle. It was an unnaturally quiet press room. Now, you've been in a lot of press rooms over the years.
Must have been a mega buffet with everyone stuffing their faces on local pate and local cooked meats and sparrows, gizzards on sticks and stuff.
Yeah. The thing is, though, after what has been a wonderful Tour de France, there's been so many. You said the most exciting Tour de France since '89. What was the '89 Tour?
Well, the '89 Tour is I have disagreements with fellow journalists about this, but I think it was the most exciting tour ever. It was the ding-dong battle between Greg LeMond and Laurent Fignon, which ended with the utterly legendary time trial to the Champs-Élysées, where Fignon fell apart like Roglic did on Saturday, and LeMond triumphed in the same way that Pogačar did on Saturday, but by 8 seconds. So the countdown for LeMond coming into the finish at that tour is just memorable, and the countdown for Fignon coming in, where you know that he's got to finish, he's got to cross the line at a certain point, and he gets so close. So this year's tour wasn't on a par with that one, but it was pretty damn good.
It was great. I loved every day. I was actually on a bike packing trip for the past 4 days, which was very brutal. At one point, though, I was sat at the top of a climb waiting for some other people to join up, and I was actually sat watching the stage on my phone, because it was that exciting this year. And the thing is, though, unlike other years, this is pretty much the start of the season. Where do these riders go from here? If you've had a good Tour de France, where do we see Pogačar ride next? Will he ride the Vuelta, do you think?
I don't know. His programme hasn't been announced for the rest of the season. He's clearly in really good form. Not sure where he goes next. What I do know is that a few of the guys who've ridden the Tour head to the Worlds next, which is the World Championships, which is on Sunday, incredibly enough, in a week's time. The week after that is the Giro d'Italia. And during the Giro d'Italia, there are the Northern Classics, which we obviously normally have in late March and April, but they've all been postponed. We have Paris-Roubaix at the end of October, which is really weird. And in my heart, I keep praying that it's going to be really bad weather.
Why? Why are you praying for bad weather?
Everyone loves a wet Paris-Roubaix, apart from the bike riders, and everyone wants one. And we very rarely get one. And it'll be absolutely intriguing this year. Obviously, it'll be the end of October. It'll be nearly dark by the time they get to the velodrome.
It will be. Having ridden parts of Paris-Roubaix, which I did a few years ago for the BBC, it is awful. It's how they ride over, especially the bit through the Forest of Arenberg. And then we have that Super Sunday as well, which is Paris-Roubaix. It's the women's Paris-Roubaix as well for the first time ever. It's the Queen stage of the Giro and a stage of the Vuelta. Am I right?
Something like that. Because I think, as I recall it, the Giro and the Vuelta overlap slightly, and then the Vuelta. I think we're more likely to see riders out who've ridden the Tour going on to the Vuelta. I know there's some talk of Egan Burnell going on to the Vuelta. I know Thibaut Pinot is talking about the Vuelta. So that'll be pretty spectacular as well.
The Giro's going to be great because, of course, you've now got Geraint Thomas, who didn't go with Ineos Grenadiers. You've got them wanting to try and salvage 2020. It's going to be a great rest of the season.
You've got Simon Yates, who's just been flying in Tirreno Adriatico, and we've got the lovely evergreen Vincenzo Nibali, who we love to watch. And in my heart of hearts, I'd love to see him win another Giro.
And just talking about young riders, young tyros, and I've never used that word before, because obviously we've got Pogačar, who's very young. We've got all these other great young riders at this year's Tour de France, this Remco Evenepoel as well, who's riding. Ineos Grenadiers have just signed. Who's the young Brit they've just signed? Tom Pidcock.
Okay, so Tom Pidcock. So
is that confirmed?
Yeah, that's just been confirmed today. It's been knowledge for about 2 months. I think I mentioned it somewhere in an article I wrote quietly a couple of months ago. But yeah, so Pidcock is part of this massive new wave of young riders. They're getting better younger. That's blindingly obvious to anyone. Some of the old ones are still pretty good too. Evenepoel, obviously, he's currently out of action after that really nasty crash in the Tour of Lombardy. There's Bernal, who hopefully will come back in the Vuelta. There's Pogačar. At Ineos, there's Sivakov as well, Pavel Sivakov. He's pretty exciting. Mathieu van der Poel's a couple of years older, but again, he's going to be well worth watching the next couple of months. I mean, we talk about Sam Bennett, but even today we noticed that a young lad out of Ireland, Ben Healy, who's actually, like Dan Martin, out of Ireland via Birmingham, won a stage in one of the hardest amateur races in France, and I'd be astonished if he's not World Tour next year as well.
Amazing.
A lot of very exciting young riders coming through. Great time in cycling terms.
It is, yeah. It's just always terrible when you hear them that they're being born in 2000. That always upsets me deeply to hear that somebody was born in 2000. The weirdest thing of all was looking at Alejandro Valverde's record and seeing that he basically began racing. He was racing in 1999 with the Benesto development squad at the point where Pogačar had not been born. And and Valverde turned pro with Calme when Pogačar was 2. It's worth putting that into context. Well, William, it's been great to chat to you. It's been great. The entire Course on Tête podcast, I've enjoyed doing them. And I think it's been a great Tour de France to cover as well. One for the ages, or at least one since 1989 to stick in the record books. Thank you so much to the Aérogramme listeners and to the Peloton magazine subscribers, as always. Make sure you check out Course on Tête. More writing on there. And we'll see you for the next Grand Tour.